And bellying up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar, but this time it's on Zoom. My name is Craig Toth, here talking with Jeffrey Paternostro at Jeff Paternostro on X, lead prospect writer, multimedia production manager, baseball prospectus at Baseball Pro. Jeffrey, how you doing today, brother?
Good. We're in the home stretch of prospect lists. San Francisco just went up today. I think we have 6 or 7 left. We're done a week from Monday, is all I know. So
you got
that's
that
where
on
I'm
your
at.
calendar. You're checking off the days. But you guys did put out the Pirates list not too long ago. The top 100 came out. A lot of stuff to talk about there. Before we jumped on, I talked about how you made some waves on Pirates Twitter a little bit. We will definitely get to that, but I don't want to go over everything you guys put into this because I obviously want people to go to Baseball Prospectus. I want them to subscribe like I do, get all of the great scouting stuff. There's also some dynasty stuff on there that can maybe help me with my my terrible fantasy baseball team, which is a dynasty. I use that a lot. I just love prospects, and I'm probably a prospect hoarder in that. But in the top 20, the big things that came out of this is that there is just a ton of pitching. I talked about this on a previous episode. Like 7 of the top 10, and then even 11, 12, and 13, all pitching. But it all starts with number 1, Paul Skeens. And you put something in there. It's you, I believe, Ben Spaniers in doing that. Some of the other, the BP staff, mentioning his dead zone shape on his fastball, talking about the velo, which this is all stuff I was like, okay, saying that he's going to be pitching 5 days a week. So the velo might go down a little bit. And I don't want to, this is paraphrasing you here, but for the most part, you said we know more about fastballs than we did 5 years ago, likely a number 2 or 3 starter, health permitting. But I mean, he does still have, that high ceiling. So on that, Jeffrey, a lot is talked about with Paul Skeens. What's your impressions on Paul Skeens?
So Paul Skeens is probably the most public prospect of recent years, and Jason Dominguez is in this category as well. But because I think a lot more people are watching college baseball now, college baseball is a lot more accessible now, through ESPN Plus or the various, conference streaming networks as well. You could sit down on a Friday night and throw on an LSU game on your Amazon Fire Stick or whatever and watch Paul Skeens pitch. And he had a hell of a season for LSU. Don't get me wrong. And look, you covered a lot of the quibbles we have with the overall profile. We have him as a top 10 prospect in baseball. We have him as the best pitching prospect in baseball. I do want to make that clear from the start. We had him as a top 3. Look, I would not have taken him first overall because I am going to generally lean towards college bats just because they're safer, and especially with Cruz and Langford and the performance they had in college. Cruz has been a prospect really since the prep. Langford was a backup catcher that had more of a breakout season his junior year, but you can look at them and just see they're very safe, good regulars that could be superstars too. I don't want to downplay that. Skeens was a perfectly fine pick first overall. If you're going to take a pitcher first overall, you want it to be someone with Paul Skeens' profile. Don't get me wrong. And we can really dig in on the fastball if you want. His fastball shape has been talked to death, really, even before he transferred to LSU, because that was his main issue at Air Force. The slider was always there. It was fastball shape. And they fixed a lot of the fastball shape issues at LSU. And he added velocity as well at LSU. And look, I don't know exactly where he's going to sit as a starter. I don't know if he's going to start in Altoona or Indianapolis, or where how exactly they're going to measure out his innings next year and how quickly they're going to move him to the majors. That's all to be seen. But he's going to be throwing on a different schedule than he did in college for the most part. Once the conference playoffs and the College World Series came around, he was throwing on a more, something more akin to a professional schedule. And look, the velocity was still there, so it might still be there. I don't know. You can't read anything much into his pro debut. He was throwing 1 or 2 innings at a time. I would expect him to sit like 96 to 98. If he sits higher than that, not impossible, certainly. And look, when you throw that hard, and there are some things to like in the fastball. It's got a good approach angle. He commands it well, which is important. He can put it at the top of the zone pretty much at will. I don't think it's, I saw the MLB pipeline poll. I don't think it's the best fastball in the minors. It's a very good fastball. His best pitch is his slider. His slider is going to be an absolute monster. It might be the best pitch in the minors right now. It'll be one of the top 10 or so breaking balls once he gets to the majors, I think. I've talked to scouts that like the change. I think the change will get there with the fastball slider combination. That's a nice to have rather than a have to have. It's just, he's a pitcher. And pitcher is the short answer. And there are concerns about his fastball shape. You know, the Pirates had him playing around with a sinker a little bit after the draft. They are an organization that likes to give pitchers sinkers, even if they don't necessarily throw sinkers as amateurs. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to give him a different fastball look. You know, Jesse Roach, who's our fantasy guy, put a Bobby Miller comp on him. And Bobby Miller also has that sinker just for a different fastball look. And he throws high 90s with worse command and similar shape issues that Skeens has. And he's got a very good breaking ball, but not as good as Skeens. But like, look, if you get, and I said it's like, if you get I keep coming back to Javier Vasquez as like a comp, as a guy that gives him a little more hard contact than you think, as hard as he throws, but misses a lot of bats. Like, if you get Javier Vasquez with the number 1 overall pick, you're doing so well. Like, that's a Hall of Very Good. I know he had some bad seasons with the Yankees and things like that, and that's kind of the colors people's impressions of him. He was a great pitcher for 15 years. You know, if you get that with the number 1 overall pick in the draft, you're doing so well. And I think Skeens has that potential. And yeah, the ace upside is still there. It's not that, you know, teams can fix fastball shape. You can do things with approach angle or with grip, and you can make changes to fastball shape. And again, some of that's just going to be his command is so good at that level of velocity versus someone like the comp. I did a little bit of number crunching before I came on, because I knew Skeens, and I knew Skeens' fastball shape was going to come up. And I just want to make one point about fastball velocity on its face, because obviously Skeens can throw 100 plus. He's got that in his locker. He'll have that in his locker in the majors, even if he's sitting more upper 90s. That's just not, we just have more information, as you said, about what makes fastballs good. And Hunter Green, who is probably the closest comp to Skeens in terms of starters that can sit high 90s and throw 102, because there are not many of them. You know, he gets a whiff rate of around 25% on his fastball, which is good. It's not amazing. It's good. And when batters make contact, the slugging is over 500. You know, slugging percentage is over 500. He has a real home run problem on his fastball in the zone because it's a very predictable shape. And you get to the majors, and guys see 98, 99, 100 fairly regularly. Not every day, but fairly regularly. And then you look at someone like Freddie Peralta for the Brewers, who throws 94 and gets 30% whiff rate on his fastball and a slugging against under 400. So, and there's reasons for that. There's shape and release point and things like that. And we just have all that information now. And I think that information is important to consider. And the fact that he was blowing college guys away at 98 and 99 because they don't see that every day doesn't mean he's going to do it in the majors. Again, it's a very good fastball. I don't think it's one of the best fastballs among prospects right now, but it's a very good fastball. It's a great slider. There's other stuff there to like. He commands it well. He's going to be in the majors quickly. He's a top 10 prospect in baseball.
Yeah, and the two things I thought of while you were talking there is number one is I've heard and I've read it in several places and thought about this, is that, I mean, I've heard that maybe Bubba Chandler's, fastball is actually better.
Jared Jones too, yeah.
Than Paul Skeens. And you said, and a Jared Jones. And the other thing you said there is, I don't remember what major leaguer said it, but it said a major leaguer can time a freight train.
Yeah.
Like if they know, that something's coming and they know how hard you throw, if it's not, pinpointed, if it doesn't have the shape, if it doesn't fool them, then, I mean, they'll knock the ball out of the park, like no matter how fast it's coming. So that's just something I was thinking about there. The second prospect, obviously, that needs to be talked about is Termarr Johnson. And Termarr Johnson, read your guys' stuff. I looked at the stuff. I believe it was from Baseball America. And a lot of the stuff is very similar, is that he's kind of gone from uh, this hit tool prospect to a power over hit. And it's maybe kind of sacrificing some of that contact. I saw you guys, and I've seen it other places as well, is that the zone contact issues, especially with the breaking ball, and that is going to make people worry, because I mean, obviously when Tamar was drafted, he like fired Pirates fans up the night he was drafted, saying, "I can't wait to win a World Series here." Was and does hit the ball all over the place. Yep. And as much as Ben, your colleague, probably likes watching games in Greensboro, to me, I'm like, if we could just get the Pirates like affiliate out of Greensboro, because you either see a guy give up a ton of home runs, or you see a guy hit a ton of home runs. And it's like sometimes their tools get overestimated. So Jeffrey, talk to me a little bit about, what you guys are seeing with Tamar Johnson. Right.
Well, I can tell you, as good as Greensboro is to hit at, and it's very good, Bradenton is not. So, and obviously he was at both stops last year. Yeah, this has been an issue for a number of years now, where you get these top-level prep hitting prospects, guys that, you watch them on the showcase circuit or in high school ball, or where taking batting practice, you're like, that's a future 300 hitter. The extreme example of this is Mickey Moniak, who went number 1 overall to the Phillies in 2016, I think. And, has gotten to the majors as like the extreme power over hit guy. His strikeout to walk rate is obscene, frankly, but he has tapped into a lot of pull side power and kind of made it work at least a little bit for him, more as a bench or platoon outfielder, which is, again, not great for the number 1 overall pick. But, Tamar Johnson is not quite, he's trending in that direction. He's not there yet. I've had scouts tell me that they think he is kind of selling out a little bit for power right now, and there's maybe still a balance to be struck there. The approach is really good. He does hit the ball harder than you think. Again, not a big guy. I think he's listed at like 5'9", which means he's probably 5'7", and really had some bump at A-ball this year, like kind of surprising power. And he expanded the zone more after his promotion, which is fairly normal, but ran pretty good chase rates, good swing decisions in Bradenton. It's just, there's like red flags here, and it is the zone contact, because the quality of pitches you see in the zone in A-ball and high A, for a player of that age, and he's young for the levels, I really want to see it over 80%. That's like the cutoff for me. And he was high 70s. Again, this is not fait accompli. This is not something that can't be fixed. It can be, but this is where it's trending right now, is sort of like a 3 true outcomes second baseman, which is a little weird as a profile. And also, I want to see how durable the power is if he's going to do this, and AA is going to be the test there. I don't know if he'll start there this year. I wouldn't be shocked, but I think he'll probably start back in Greensboro, and then you're looking, for a month or 6 weeks of consolidation before you move him along to Altoona. But you really want to see that power, if this is what his profile is going to be going forward. I don't know that it is, but it is trending in that direction. He really needs to be like a 25 home run a year guy. There we go. To make that work. And again, the exit velocities are good. They're very good for his age. There's not a lot of physical projection there. So again, he's kind of turned into a prove it at every level guy for me, given the changes to the skill set. So you need to see what's now a very, it's a skill set that has much finer lines, because if he loses a little bit of in zone, or he starts expanding the zone a little bit more when he sees better breaking stuff, it's, when you're looking at like a guy that, again, was to be a 300 hitter as an amateur, that now looks like, oh, if he hits 250, it'll work. But he's got to keep hitting 250, basically.
Yeah, and that's where, I think that, a lot of people, including myself, thought he would come out, be like that over 300 hitter, hit for some power. Obviously has good, strikeout rates to base on ball rates. Like the strikeout rate's a little bit higher, but the base on ball rate comes up enough to make up for that. but it was definitely not exactly what I expected to see from him, as a prospect. And he did show power, in Bradenton, which, yeah, I mean, people that have been down there, the winds blow so crazily there that like pretty much it's usually like knocking stuff down as opposed to, carrying it out. People are like, oh, it's windy, so it's, you're going to hit home runs. I'm like, no, most of the time that wind is like blowing in and knocking stuff down. So it's definitely good to see. I think he's going to start in Greensboro as well. Ben Cherington has kind of shown that he likes to give guys like places to take off from, to have success at first, instead of like throwing them into a situation. But I mean, he also has given like pretty quick promotions to players like a Jared Jones last year. Was in Altoona for a shorter period of time. I saw him as maybe a cup of coffee guy in Indianapolis, and spent a lot of time there. And I mean, we could kind of just jump right into it here, is that after Tamar Johnson, you have a string of pitchers. Like I said, 7 out of the top 10. And then those few after there, I believe that was like a Hunter Barco, Xander Muth, guys like that. So in that 3 to 7 range, it kind of seems like you might be more of a Jones guy. But before we hopped on here, we talked about that there's not as much separation between, a lot of those guys. You could almost, in my eyes, maybe interchange the numbers, and they're all, kind of at the same level.
Yeah, I think Jones is the clear number 3 for me. He was in consideration for the 101. I kind of would have liked to get him on it. Sometimes you just run out of names, basically, which is what happened this year. But he's a guy that took a little bit of a step forward. It's like a subtle one, right? Because I think the slider's better than it was last year. The command's a little bit better, but just the success he had in the upper minors, I think makes a big difference there. He's a guy now that's one phone call away. He's a major league rotation candidate in short order in 2024. But yeah, beyond that, again, I'm actually not a big Bubba Chandler guy. That's more Ben than me. But yeah, I kind of like Ashcraft a little bit more, and he kind of liked Chandler a little bit more, and I kind of liked Harrington a little bit more, and he liked Solometo a little bit more, and we kind of went back and forth on this. And it's a group of guys that are, again, in the generally speaking, reliever risk is there, probably more for Ashcraft given the injuries, if anything, but like 3-4 starter range. And mentioned to me that that people took the large number of average-ish starting pitching prospect as a bit of a dig, and it's not. This kind of starting pitching depth is actually fairly unusual for the list. Like having a Owen Kellington type outside of the top 10 is not usual for a lot of these systems. That kind of even Muth to an extent, although I have concerns about the strike throwing there. He's also a recent prep draftee, so that'll get sorted out. But you collect enough of these arms as the Pirates have, there's a good chance that, we talk about OFP as 75th percentile outcome. I can give you the whole spiel on that. But the long and the short of it is that you collect enough guys that are potential number 3 or number 4 starters. So somewhere between league average pitchers and, 10 to 15% above league average by whatever your ERA estimator of choices. The odds are this doesn't always happen. And we can have a longer conversation, probably not for this podcast, about Pirates pitching development writ large, but there's a good chance like one of them's a number 2 or number 3 starter, right? You get this level of arm talent, this collection of arm talent. The likelihood is that, like as Jones kind of did this year, that somebody's going to pop or find another level. And then that's a good problem to have. Like, obviously you are not going to start all of these guys at one time. That's not the way baseball works. That's not the way prospects work. But you get this much of a collection of talent. And like, look, you can also trade them for major league roster needs. I know the Pirates don't generally do that, but that is the thing. That is an option you have if you have, a bit of a logjam between Solometo and Ashcraft and Jones, and, Chandler and Harrington are probably a year or two behind that. But it is a good problem to have. And I think they're in pretty good shape for minor league pitching right now. The actual issue is they don't really have a lot of bats. Is the larger issue. And look, some of that is, Henry Davis graduated, Andy Rodriguez graduated. I know he's going to be out with the UCL surgery, but Liover Peguero graduated. So they have, that is these are major league factors. We'll put it that way for now. O'Neill Cruz, another one, obviously was a top 20 prospect. So all of this stuff is kind of cyclical. The system's a little bit down from what it's been in recent years. The pitching is still very good. The bats are pretty shallow. And yes, if you want to rank Anthony Solometto at 4 in this system, I am not going to argue with you very strenuously as the short form.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, people, they get their prospects that they kind of hold on to, and they want to see them. And I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I usually trust the scouts, the experts, and realizing that a lot of times there's not a big degree of difference between, certain players. And I mean, most of these guys, I mean, even including a Thomas Harrington, even though he was, I will always mention this, the Campbell fighting camels, I will get that hat at some point in time, are still, very young arms, and they've moved through the system, fairly quickly. You had, Jared Jones, a two-way player in high school, and then, moved to the mound, and he's, already in AAA. Anthony Solometto, you have him, not throwing that many innings in high school, and then he's already in AA. Bubba Chandler, another two-way player, extremely young. So, I mean, and like you said, like an Owen Kellington, a Shim is another guy who, we haven't seen, a ton of work from him, unfortunately, just due to injuries and different stuff. But I mean, the big part for me there is that, yeah, we're talking about like not having, impact bats. In your list, you have the Sung Chae Chang, you have Mitch Jebb in there, who, I mean, are fairly, in my eyes, like safe bats. If that's like a good way to put it, not high impact, but I think you guys put them as, more than likely major leaguers. I mean, not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed for a prospect, but you could see them being contributors, but they don't have that impact stuff. So people go back to the Pirates in the early, 2010s, where it's like, you had Andrew McCutchen coming up. You had Starling Marte coming up. You had, to a lesser degree, Neil Walker coming up. You had, some of these guys who had these bats. But you've also said a lot of those guys are already at the majors now. They've already graduated. It's going to be, are they going to be able to perform there? To me, like if a team like the Pirates is going to succeed, it's going to come from the arms. And it showed last year that they didn't have enough. We thought they did. You need all the arms.
Yep. That's how the league's going right now. Like you do whatever pitching depth you think you have, you need more. And look, the bats are there. This generation of, this core of the Pirates, let's say, is not going to rise and fall on the success of Mitch Jebb or Sung Chae Chen, or really even to an extent Tamara Johnson. It's going to be, is Brian Hayes's power breakout at the end of 2023 real? And I love Brian Hayes. I really hope it is. Is O'Neill Cruz, a healthy O'Neill Cruz, able to take a little bit of a step forward with the bat? Because there are some ludicrous high-end outcomes there if he makes a little more contact, given what he can do at the plate and in the field. It looks like Henry Davis is going to be the catcher, given Eddie Rodriguez's injury. And I guess you live with it if he hits, which he did to an extent last year. So they have, it's all there. Obviously, Ryan Reynolds is locked up long term. So if you look around and like you can squint and see it, but it's going to have to come from the players that have already, functionally graduated from my purview, at least.
Yeah. And the last player that I want to talk to you about here is, everybody thinks that I dislike this player. I just see a wide array of outcomes for him. You use the word outcomes. I will use the same. And you also tweeted about this guy too. You said, I kind of like Jack Brannigan.
I do kind of like Jack Brannigan. This is another situation where he college bat that was at levels that weren't entirely, probably. Look, he should have done what he did last year as a college bat at A-ball and higher. That's fine. Those are functionally the table stakes, right? But I was working him up, and he did get to Greensboro, so Ben saw him a little bit. But I did some video work on him too when I was sort of canvassing the Pirates list, and I'm like, I kind of like this. Like I don't kind of like it. Like, again, I don't know. You can get into this is an old sort of scouting cliche that myself and Jarrett Seidler, other senior prospect writer, talk about a lot. But you can get in on these like you watch this guy and you're like, and you'll talk to scouts and they'll say the same thing too. It's like maybe not a particular prospect to note, like a next 10 guy like Brannigan is, and you'll watch me like, I really like Jack Brannigan. Like, you do a bunch of different stuff. You play a bunch of positions. There's like sneaky power there. The approach is good baseball player. And then you'd be like, what'd you write him up as? Like 45. And it's like, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, there might be a little bit more there, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Again, that's another guy I'm going to see at AA to see if sort of the power is a little more durable. But yeah, I kind of like him. And look, you need guys like that, right? That kind of it's not even organizational depth. It's better than that. You need a guy that can start for a month when Brian Hayes pulls his hamstring and just everything keeps moving forward smoothly. And I think he can be that kind of guy for you.
Yeah, the defense is definitely not a question for him. Yeah. The arm is obviously not a question for him. The strikeout rate's a little bit high, and then went to Arizona and just.
I don't like so the AFL stuff, and we just put up our Padres list on Wednesday. So I had to write up Jacob Marcy, who is the AFL MVP, and hit like 300, 400, 700 or something there. Like the Arizona Fall League is useful for a number of things. For prospect writers to be able to get TANs in October, to see if pitchers are still healthy or are healthy, basically. It's a good place to get extra reps if a guy hasn't been healthy. But it's not the best place to make like broad proclamations about what a prospect is over the balance of the season, especially with someone like Brannigan, who played basically the full season, and Marcy played too. Like, we have looks at Brannigan on staff. We have looks at Marcy on staff. I did video on both of them. We were doing the Padres and Pirates list. So the AFL stuff is, I don't think, particularly meaningful, and it cuts in both directions, good or bad. You can look at it as a guy like, well, Brannigan played. It's a long season. He played all year, and then he sits at home for a couple of weeks, and then goes to Arizona and has to get back off, and the schedule's a little off. And you get Marcy, who hit great, and like, well, you're seeing a widely variable quality of pitching. It's a launching pad. All those parks are launching pads. So I try not to, like, there's a guy or two every year where the Arizona Fall League is like meaningful information. Last year it was Mason Miller for the A's. It's like, oh, Mason Miller is healthy and he's throwing really good. Like, the velocity is upper 90s. The breaking ball looks great. That's like useful information to me. Jack Brannigan not really posting a good OPS over a month, playing 4 out of 7 days. It's not really useful information to me.
Yeah, and that's just like tongue in cheek with me, because I talked about the Arizona Fall League and just basically said that, I mean, there's also guys there that are working on certain pitches. There's guys that are, tweaking, trying out new approaches to get into the off season with. It's just definitely a thing. But I mean, I had to bring him up since you mentioned him, because people probably think that I don't like Jack Brannigan. I actually like him a lot. I just kind of at one point in time mentioned him as a guy that could fall into the Matt Frazier, Matt Gorski trend.
Yeah, absolutely.
That when they went from Greensboro to Altoona, kind of like, that's where Pirates, I mean, before, people used to go to Indianapolis to kind of like, I wouldn't say die, but to find their plateau. And now it kind of seems like, Altoona's been the measuring stick. But Jeffrey, I could talk baseball all day. People are waiting for some beer reviews here, but if people do not do this, you guys have to follow Jeffrey Paternostro. You have to follow, I think it's Craig Goldstein, the editor. You have to follow Ben Spanier, follow Baseball Prospectus, get on there, subscribe to it. Has like I said, just a lot of great information, very analytical. If analytical stuff is your thing, which, I mean, for a guy that is my age, that's not usually the norm, but it kind of tickled my fancy, or I got the bug a few years ago, and I just dig into it all the time now.
Jeffrey, it's funny. I've always said I'm a a dinosaur in that way. Like I want to go to the park and see the guys and see the players. I always have. You know, when I first started out, I was driving up and down the Eastern Seaboard. But you got
Yeah.
like you have to consider the data now. Like the teams are obviously doing it. It's just it's more actionable. And I sit on a guy for 6 games and he plays another 120 over the course of the year. I'm not necessarily getting representative looks.
Yeah, absolutely. And believe me, I mean, I got my Altoona stuff on. I'm ready for the curve baseball just as much as I am for, the Pirates season to
Yeah.
start. So I'm
I got
definitely in
my,
that
my
direction as
whatever it is,
well.
March 13th, the prospect showcases in Arizona. I'll be down
Well,
there for
here's the thing
that.
is
So yeah.
I will be in Florida on the 14th for the Pirates versus the Orioles,
Yeah.
the showcase.
That'll be a good one.
I scheduled my trip around that because my wife was like,
Yeah.
"Didn't you go on the weekend the past few times you've gone?" And I'm like, "Well, this is going on, and I really want to see this game, and they're playing at Atlanta earlier in the week, and I
Yeah.
really want to see Atlanta, so got to make the trip during the week." But Jeffrey, I appreciate it. Let's get to some beer reviews,
All
guys.
right.
I was telling Jeffrey before this that usually I have like the local craft beers, different stuff like that. Last week I did for dry January. I did some non-alcoholic beers. This time the weekend was crazy. The Steeler game was supposed to be on Sunday, got moved to Monday, had people coming over, sent my wife out for some beers, and she brought me back the Samuel Adams primetime beers. And here's the funny thing is for me, Samuel Adams is like one of the original craft beers. And a lot of times, just because it has become so popular and so mainstream, it kind of loses its luster a little bit. But I will say these 4 beers that I had, and I'd had one of them before. I'd had the Cold Snap White Ale.
Mhm.
That one is, about a 5.3%. And it's an easy drinking beer. This would be the pack that I would probably get if I was inviting friends over. And I think maybe that's where my wife's thinking was at, because I mean, if it's something that you want to drink, but you also want to have stuff there for your friends who are not big craft beer drinkers. They had the Red Zone Lager at 6.2%, Cold Snap at 5.3%, a Breakaway Blonde Ale at 4.7%, and a Postseason IPA, which did not have a great deal of hoppiness, coming in at 4.5%. Jeffrey, who's probably never listened to this before, I do what is called the Waboba, the weighted based on batting average for my beers,
Uh-huh.
starting with the scales. The 400s and above is the Clemente. The 300s is the Stargell. The 200s is obviously the Mendoza, because, why not?
Of course.
And then the 100s is one of my favorite players of all time, and that is Kevin Polkovich. Was just basically a guy who hit in the 180s for the Pirates. So for these one guys, I'm going to give it a straight across the board. I'm going to give these ones a 375. Weighted based on batting average for all of these would go down a little bit, so they all come down to a 325. But this would be one that if you are, like I said, having people over, you like craft beer, but other people don't, you can just basically say, well, I have a lager, I have a blonde ale, and people just basically like, okay, I'll drink that. That sounds good. So this is a good one to have in your fridge. Not the top pack that I've ever gotten. And Jeffrey, what are you drinking today?
So I have from TF Brewing, which is right in downtown Salt Lake. They do a lot of German and Czech styles. That's kind of their thing. They have an unfiltered German style Pilsner. This is their Keller beer. I assume it is exactly 5. Oh, it's actually 4.7. Generally, everything here, if you serve it on draft, has to be 5% or less. So that's a lot of the stuff that gets canned. It gets canned at exactly 5%. This is really good. It's a little bit warmer today. I had to shovel out my driveway twice yesterday, but it's like 47 degrees. So I wanted something a little bit crisp. This is like one of their mainline Brews, like I can get it in my local grocery store. I don't have to go to the brewery. Even the brewery's like 10 minutes from me. It's just a very easy drinking Pilsner, a little bit of hop note on it. I actually prefer they have a further conditioned organic one that I have to go to the brewery to get, which is a little more character to it. But this is just, again, this is a great one. It's winter. It's not even 5 o'clock here yet. You know, you want to have a little sip of something that's just this. It's very refreshing. It goes down easy. I can have 2 in a night and not feel awful the next day. So that's what I am drinking.
Okay. And what would you give it on the Woboba, the weighted based on batting average?
So this is like it's a nice everyday player. So probably like a 340 or a 350.
Okay.
Like you're happy to see it in the lineup. You know, you might want to occasionally look for an upgrade. It's not something you necessarily seek out, but it's generally available, generally good, always reliable. It's very reliable. You know, it's not like a month to month variant player. He's gonna post his like 280, 340, 450 line for you, and day in and day out. Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey, I will tell you, you are the first guest that has participated in the beer review. I appreciate that, brother.
The long prospect list season.
You're like counting down the days, counting down the days.